The world around us is changing faster than ever before. As early as 2016, the World Economic Forum estimated that about 2/3 of children just entering school would ultimately work in new job types and fulfilling functions that didn't yet exist. They predicted that by 2020, the average half-life of employee skills would be 5 years, necessitating unprecedented requirements to upskill, reskill, and adapt in order to thrive in the workplace. A global pandemic brought disruption to a whole new level. These factors have had a fundamental, long-lasting impact on our expectations and requirements from education. How can we, as educators, enable our students to succeed in their learning, in their future professional lives, as full social participants? And importantly, how can we future-proof our approaches and respond to these powerful forces of change?
At UCD, we're proud of our holistic, student-focused and research-led educational experience. We recognise that to thrive in an ever-changing world, we must prepare our graduates to meet the challenges of today's society in order to equip them with the knowledge, skills, experience and attitudes they need to flourish in present and future Irish and global societies. Our teaching and learning strategies must emphasise critical appraisal and the application of knowledge, rather than just the assimilation of facts. A wide range of occupations will increasingly require a higher degree of cognitive abilities, such as creativity, logical reasoning, and problem solving.
As part of our focus on educational excellence, University College Dublin established a fellowship programme in teaching and academic development. The aim of this programme is to focus pedagogical research on areas of strategic importance to the university, with the overall goal effecting transformational change in teaching, learning and assessment practices across the institution. This project brought together 4 fellows from our colleges of science, health and agricultural sciences and social sciences and law, with the overall remit of exploring effective use of the virtual learning environment to support meaningful student learning.
Our research focused on designing and testing strategies to promote metacognitive skill development, supported by our new virtual learning environment, Brightspace by D2L. We developed and analysed the effectiveness of a cross-disciplinary framework to aid metacognition through a range of theory-driven learning interventions. Metacognition, or thinking about thinking, is an essential skill for both effective critical thinking and lifelong learning. It involves 2 key components: knowledge of cognition, recognition of approaches and strategies, and regulation of cognition. Research has demonstrated a clear link between metacognitive skills and academic achievement, and importantly, evidence suggests that it is possible to develop these skills with student-centred teaching and learning approaches. However, there is uncertainty as to how best to use the online environment to effectively develop students' metacognitive skills, with research showing that students can particularly struggle in this setting. We aim to harness the online environment as a mechanism to influence student learning, both inside and outside normal class time.
Having a strong evidence base to our approach was a priority for this project. We spent 6 months reviewing the literature and from this created our metacognition design framework to support metacognitive teaching using a hybrid of face-to-face and online learning. Our framework is underpinned by 5 broad pillars of practice adapted from work published by the Education Endowment Foundation for secondary K-12 education. These practice themes were mapped into actionable learning interventions using an approach strongly influenced by Oliver's learning design sequences.
We place the student at the centre of the learning process, focusing on learning activities that enable them to achieve their learning outcomes and the learning resources and supports necessary to help them do this. The core student activity is a complex project designed to reflect a challenging problem in their field of study. The resources and supports available to the student as they progress through the complex project can be grouped into 4 key themes. Resources and teaching centred around introducing metacognition and strategy use start the process by aiding the development of metacognitive knowledge. Signposting provides clarity to students as they progress through the learning tasks and communicates to them the expectations and requirements for these. Enabling the students to plan, monitor and assess their learning is essential for metacognitive regulation and requires the provision of opportunities for them to do this. They also need to be able to evaluate their work, guided by feedback that can be delivered in a variety of formats. Throughout the process, students are encouraged to consider their learning through structured reflection and ongoing metacognitive dialogue. If we add colour to our sketch, we can start to see how we map these activities to our metacognitive pillars. The mnemonic IC highlights the 4 overall approach themes: introducing, signposting, enabling and evaluating. Effectively harnessing the virtual learning environment in combination with standard teaching approaches offers the opportunity for delivery of engaging, interactive content and the creation of a responsive, personalised learning environment. It also offers the opportunity to influence student learning over a far greater period of time. To appreciate how this metacognition design framework translates into practice and learning within the virtual learning environment, it is easiest to look at examples from 3 modules we developed using this approach. These examples are shown within Brightspace, the learning environment designed by D2L that has recently been adopted in our university. Effectively, there are student and staff-facing sides to this learning journey. Each of the learning approaches in our framework is teamed up with the appropriate tools within Brightspace to allow staff to effectively engage with their students and create an interactive, personalised learning environment. The complex project draws on authentic real-world content to spark interest in student engagement. One of the key features when introducing the metacognitive process to students is a carefully constructed learning pathway. We presented materials in logically organised segments to help students identify and focus on critical concepts and content. As students embark on their assignments, signposting is provided to guide their learning, using tools such as rubrics and exemplars to communicate expectations. There were a range of opportunities enabling students to regulate their learning and aid the development of effective learning strategies. For example, checklists to aid planning and allow them to monitor their progress. Evaluating themselves and taking time to take stock of their progress at key points in their learning is very important for students. The provision of quizzes or reusable learning objects allows this, and the automation of tasks using VLE tools facilitates the delivery of this feedback from a staff perspective.
Having designed this framework to enhance learning, we wanted to know how students engaged with this approach in our 3 case study modules. Did they learn any differently? We took a mixed method approach with our research to answer this question. Students completed the previously validated metacognitive awareness inventory and the self-efficacy for learning component of the motivation for learning questionnaire before and after participation in our case study interventions. This provided a measure of the change in their metacognitive awareness. We also gathered reflections and learning from students as they progressed through the intervention. And at the end of their modules, we invited students to take part in focus groups to share their experiences in greater depth. Our results showed a significant impact on student learning. To begin, quantitative data gathered from the Metacognitive Awareness Inventory showed a significant increase in students' metacognitive awareness. More specifically, looking at the 2 components of metacognition, from the start to the end of the modules, there was a significant increase in their knowledge of cognition. What students know about learning, for example, strategies on when and how to use them. There was also a significant increase in their regulation of cognition, how students plan their learning, for example, applying the strategies to self-regulate their learning and evaluate their progress. Students were also more confident in their ability to learn, evidenced by a significant increase in their self-efficacy for learning scores over the course of this intervention. Krista will now present some of our qualitative data. Importantly, there is a strong convergence with our quantitative data, strengthening our evidence base and providing a more detailed insight into the experiences of our students.
Our students' feedback makes an even more compelling case for a metacognitive approach to learning. We found evidence for each of the IC strategies in learning across our cases. These are introducing, signposting, enabling, and evaluating. First, introducing. One of the key features of our introducing metacognition to students was a structured approach to learning through Brightspace. For example, the clear organization of learning in segments, which were laid out logically in Brightspace, led students to break down content around critical concepts. Students spotted the new presentation of information and linked this to their learning. Students appreciated this structured approach to learning, observing, for example,
rather than focusing on absolutely everything, you're just focusing on one thing, learning it really well, and then moving on to the next.
Within segments, we provided content to provide a foundation for learning. Students engaged with a range of learning modes, including lectures, readings, and training activities. And Brightspace tools enabled the provision of this content to provide a meaningful pathway through information. Next, signposting. As students began work on their authentic, complex assessment, they had a range of signposts to guide their learning, including rubrics and exemplars. Students valued these resources for learning. For example, they found the rubric for assessing their reflections useful. As one student said,
rubrics are really handy because you get to learn a bit more. Like you knew a bit more of what was actually being asked for.
And then enabling. We also used a range of opportunities within Brightspace to enable students to progress with their learning. For example, students described checklists as motivators and facilitators of self-regulation of their learning by giving them confidence in organizing their learning into digestible chunks and in completing tasks. As students commented,
the checklist was very self-motivating. You knew what you had to do. You literally just tick it off, and it's kind of broken down into manageable tasks. Definitely was very useful.
Finally, evaluating. We also provided more checkpoints in learning to help students take stock of their progress. Students valued feedback opportunities, including feedback from staff in audio and verbal forms, as well as peer feedback as written comments and video. Quizzes and reusable learning objects such as e-tutorials provided students with opportunities to explore and then test themselves of their understanding of that content. Students appreciated the opportunities for feedback and self-evaluation, noting that
quizzes were a really nice way of testing your knowledge of the module without being worried about stressing out for tests and stuff. Really helpful in terms of self-directing your learning.
the majority of students in focus groups favored peer feedback for helping them understand their learning more fully by reviewing the work of others. Throughout the process of learning in each intervention, students were encouraged to reflect on their learning. Students understood and valued the use of reflection, as one student reported.
And I think the video reflections or the video feedback was really good because it meant that we had feedback on stuff that wasn't actually graded. I felt like I actually knew exactly what was expected from us from the module, and from the feedback knew what I needed to do as well.
Overall, students were very positive about metacognitive approaches to learning, reporting that interventions encouraged them to plan, monitor, and reflect upon their learning. They described the interventions as reducing uncertainty around task completion and increasing their motivation to learn. Students advocated greater coherence to align assessment strategies in their degree programs with our interventions. They valued the clear structure that was core to the design of each of these case studies within the virtual learning environment.
The metacognition design framework has proven to be a key driver for students to develop the metacognitive skills required for successful lifelong learning and workplace participation.
Our work is gaining momentum. University stakeholders, including deans, vice principals for teaching and learning, and educational technologists, have unanimously advocated the use of our metacognitive design framework and recognise the potential value of this approach. As a team, we are really delighted with the success of this project and the ongoing impact of our work.
In a time when we're all increasingly aware of the use of technology in learning, This project highlights the huge potential for a carefully articulated blended approach to support effective learning in our students and the development of key skills.
The project itself strongly aligns with several strands of our strategy 2020 to 2024, Rising to the Future. We face an age of unprecedented opportunity and challenge. Digital learning technologies and VLEs have become a cornerstone of teaching and learning in third-level education. They now offer the potential to enhance student engagement through the generation of blended courses that spark interest and promote student-led inquiry. How these technologies are effectively harnessed to enhance meaningful student learning is a major challenge that requires careful consideration and planning. This exciting project offers important insight into how this might be achieved. This research shines a light on how the virtual learning environment can be harnessed to promote metacognitive skills in students. It's particularly relevant for education today and has a central role to play in the realignment of learning in blended spaces in UCD and other institutions in a post-pandemic world.
This project is now at an exciting stage, having gained a broad base of evidence to validate the use of their metacognition design framework to orchestrate blended learning and support metacognitive skill development. Our fellows are looking to broaden the impact of their work through wider dissemination and adoption of their approach, and invite you to join their emerging community of practice. I urge you to consider how you can harness the potential offered by the blended metacognitive learning and help your students to realise their full potential.